How did we get here? Because if you're watching Canadian politics right now, it's hard to shake the feeling that something doesn't quite add up. There's a majority, there's control, there's supposed to be stability. But when you actually watch what's happening, the tone of it, the reaction to it, the way people are talking about it, it doesn't feel that way at all. And I don't think that's just me noticing it. I think a lot of Canadians are quietly asking the same question. How did we get here?
From the headlines to what's really going on underneath. This is The Canadianist. Real conversations about Canada. What's happening, why it matters, and where it's all heading. Here's Chris.
Hello, friends, fellow Canadians. I'm Christopher M. Michaud. Welcome to the podcast. This is The Canadianist. Let's slow this down and really look at what's in front of us right now. Because when you step back and take it all in, this isn't just one result. It's a full picture. Start with the Liberals. They've come out of this holding a majority. That's the headline, and that's what's being talked about. On paper, that's control. That's stability. That's the ability to govern without relying on anyone else. But when you look a little closer, it's not that simple. This is a very broad tent. You've got different political viewpoints, different regions, different priorities, all sitting under the same umbrella. So the question becomes, is this actually cohesion, or is this alignment under pressure? Is this a group moving in the same direction, or a group moving together because that's where the power is right now? Managing that kind of range is not simple. It's not automatic. It's work. Now shift over to the Conservatives. And at this point, it's hard to treat what's happened there as isolated events. They had a long, sustained lead in the polls, and at one point, a very significant lead. That's gone. They go into an election with that kind of momentum, and they lose. The leader loses his own seat, and since then, you're seeing cracks. MPs leaving the caucus, reports of others who aren't fully aligned, a sense that internally things aren't settled. Then the by-elections come along, and they're not really a factor. And now, when you look at the polling, it's not showing a rebound. It's showing more slippage. So at a certain point, you have to ask whether the party's actually reading the country correctly. Because the messaging sounds like it's holding the base, but it's not reaching beyond it. And then you have the NDP. And this is a very different situation. They're coming out of this with a much smaller presence, 6 seats. That's a major shift in relevance at the national level. And when you listen to the early messaging, what you're hearing is a focus on things like grocery pricing, affordability, and concerns around pricing models. Things like dynamic pricing, where costs can shift based on data, behavior, or even individual circumstances. Now, those are real concerns. People feel that day to day in their lives. But when you're coming out of a result like this, the question becomes, is that enough to rebuild from? Because right now, it doesn't feel like they're part of the central conversation. It feels like they're trying to find a way back into it. And then there's the Bloc. The Bloc is what it's always been, relevant in Quebec, focused on Quebec, and outside of that, not a factor in shaping the national direction. So when you put all of that together, what do you actually have? You have a governing party with a majority, but a very broad coalition to manage. You have an opposition that's struggling to regain footing. You have a third party that's been reduced and is trying to redefine itself. And then you have a regional party operating in its own lane. That's the landscape. And if you're just watching this, not as a partisan, just as someone trying to make sense of it, it doesn't feel cohesive. It doesn't feel like one country moving in a shared direction. It feels like separate tracks running at the same time. Hello, friends. Welcome back to the podcast. I am Christopher M. Michaud. This is The Canadianist. This is segment 2. The first half of the show, we were setting up the political landscape, talking about the results of the by-elections on Monday. The Liberals swept all 3 of them, and now they're sitting on a majority government. And this is where you start to wonder if we're all looking at the same thing, because the way this is being presented and the way it actually feels don't quite line up. We keep hearing the word stability, that this result brings stability, that a majority government allows things to function, to move forward, to pass legislation. And again, on paper, that's true. But stability on paper and stability in the country are not the same thing. Because when you look at the support behind that majority, the picture changes. A large portion of Canadians did not vote for the governing party. And that doesn't just disappear because the seat count says majority. It stays there in how people feel about what's happening and in how they react to it. So what you're really looking at is something more complicated. A government with the ability to act and a country that is not fully aligned behind it. And that creates pressure. Not necessarily chaos in Parliament, but tension across the country. So now the job isn't just governing, it's managing that gap, explaining decisions, lowering the temperature, keeping people engaged in a system that doesn't always feel like it reflects them. And that is not a simple task. Because even when the numbers look solid, they don't take much to shift. People step away, internal disagreements happen, circumstances change. So yes, there is stability in the numbers, but there's also fragility in the reality. So when you take all of this together, you almost have to stop and ask, what exactly are we looking at here? Because this is supposed to be stability. But what it actually looks like is one party holding all of the cards. And that's how the system is designed. When one party has the numbers, they set the direction, they pass the legislation, and they define the agenda. But that doesn't mean it fully reflects the country. This majority didn't come from a unified national consensus. It came from how the system translates votes into seats. It came from what's happening inside Parliament. So what you end up with is full control in one place without full alignment across the country. And that's where the idea of stability starts to break down. Because real stability isn't just about control, it's about balance. You want a strong governing party, but you also want a strong opposition. You want multiple voices at the table, even when you don't agree with them, because that's what forces compromise. And compromise is how durable decisions get made. If you think about it outside of politics, any situation where multiple parties are involved, when the table is balanced, it stays stable. But when one side dominates, the table tilts, and eventually things start to slide. And in politics, that shows up as resentment, division, policies being undone the moment power changes hands. So yes, a majority can move quickly. It can push through an agenda. But long term, that doesn't always create stability. It creates cycles. Whereas when you have a balance, you get something stronger, more durable, more reflective of the country. And you're actually seeing a real-time example of this right now. When the war in Iran started to affect gas prices, we had calls, particularly from the conservatives, to suspend fuel taxes in response to rising costs at the pump. That was part of the conversation. And then, immediately after the by-elections, the government comes out and says they're going to suspend the federal excise tax on fuel for a defined period. Now what happens? Well, online it turns into a fight. One side says, they're stealing our ideas. The other side says, this is responsible governing. And it becomes all about credit. But if you step back, that's actually what a functioning system is supposed to look like. The opposition raises an issue. They propose something. The government takes it, adjusts it, applies it in their own way, and then implements it. That's not theft. That's responsiveness. That is the system working. And the irony is, instead of recognizing that, the reaction is more division. When in reality, that's exactly the kind of exchange you want more of, because in a balanced parliament, that's the norm. Ideas move, they get refined, they get better. But when one party holds all the power, that process becomes optional. And that's the difference. And this is where something different has to start taking shape. Because what Canadians are feeling right now isn't just disagreement, it's fatigue. fatigue with being told it has to be one side or the other, fatigue with watching power concentrate in a way that doesn't reflect how people actually voted. The United Canadian centrists are built around a simple idea that in a country with multiple perspectives, the system should reflect multiple voices. Not hand full control to one party at a time. This isn't about replacing one party with another. It's about changing how representation works, so outcomes actually feel like they match the country. So when you look at where we are right now, it's not just about who won. It's about whether this actually feels like it reflects the country. And if it doesn't, then the real conversation has to move beyond the result and start focusing on the system that produced it. Because if that system stays the same, this feeling, it's not going anywhere. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. As we move forward, we're going to start expanding the show, more topics, more depth, and more engagement. And once the studio is ready, we'll be moving into a new space and bringing video into the mix as well. There's a lot coming, and I'm looking forward to building this out with you. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss the next episode. I'm Christopher M. Michaud, and I'm a Canadianist. And if this resonates with you, I invite you to continue the conversation at thecanadianist.news. And to find out more about the United Canadian Centrists and our vision for Canada's future, visit uccparty.ca. See you next time.
You've been listening to The Canadianist. New episodes daily. Real conversations about Canada. What's happening, why it matters, and where it's all heading. Subscribe and stay connected. The Canadianist.